Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
To do that. I listened to your record since I think the first one you did with Kenny Wheeler and John Abercrombie, and this is probably like almost 20 years ago or even longer, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually a fair ways into my recording career. There's some earlier than that, but yeah, I remember those CDs very well.
Yeah, so that since then, you've played with with some of my favorite artists and become one of my favorite artists, and especially the solo piano recordings are just like, I mean, I'm a guitarist, but like when I listen to your solo stuff, it's just mind blowing. I love that.
Thank you. If you ever need CDs, just let me know. It's no problem.
I usually like, nowadays it's really bad for us artists, but I listen to these on these Deezers and stuff, which
I know everything's on YouTube,
which sucks, but yeah. But thank you so much. I will definitely. I mean, I would love to buy them. If not,
don't
more important. So, but Mark, I would first like to ask you. I already talked with Drew Gress about. I love Drew. We played together, and I've known him for such a long time, and I guess you too. So I checked your rhythm sections, and you played with Drew for like 30 years probably, right?
Well, more. Almost. Actually, the first time I played with Drew, we were both living in the Washington, D.C. and Baltimore area. And I guess this must have been, I'm going to guess 1985, 1986, sometime around then, 87. And I had I was, in addition to doing jazz clubs, I would do these little private parties where they wanted jazz.
Yeah.
So this guy, wealthy guy, had a cocktail party and he wanted piano and bass. I said, fine. And, my usual guys were busy, and I got Drew's name from somebody, maybe from Ellery Escalin, who was also down there at that time. I can't remember. Anyway, he shows up, he's 17, 18 years old, and he played great, but I remember, now keep in mind, he's 17 or 18.
Yeah, sure.
And, I'd say, okay, let's do any tunes you want to play. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're talking. We can play.
Yeah.
He said, no, whatever you want to play. I said, okay, I fall in love too easily. He goes, okay, wait a minute. And he starts thumbing through the real book.
Really?
Which he put on the piano. So he did the whole gig like that. He played great.
So cool.
But afterwards, I talked to him a little bit. I said, look, I'd like you to do some of my work with my bands, He said, oh, great. I said, but I have to ask you a favor. He said, what's that? I said, you know that real book? He said, yeah. I said, burn it. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you gotta learn this stuff,
Yeah.
And bless his heart, he did exactly that. And we've been playing together since then. What is that, 80? That's almost 40 years.
Yeah, 36 years then, something like that.
37.
Wow. Incredible.
Something like that, 36, 37. He's my favorite bass player.
Yeah, so. He's incredible. I also love the stuff you guys do on this last quintet album. And it's basically you gathered people that you've known for 20 years or even more. And it's like a friends gathering.
In Randy's case, Randy and Dave both, that's getting on more like 50 some years.
Dave also?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
See, Randy I knew when I was still in high school because Michael and I,
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
yeah, we were in the same big band in high school. I was playing saxophone. We sat right next to each other. So Mike was my buddy. Randy was like the famous older brother. You
Yeah.
know, he was already kind of a big deal. He had spent I don't know if he spent 1 year or more, I can't remember, but at Indiana University, and then he moved to New York. And but I knew Randy just from, you know, I'd see him on vacations or whatever. He'd come home
Yeah.
and maybe play a little bit. And he also did a couple gigs with this high school band I had in Philly with Mike and with uh, two or three musicians from other parts of Philly, which included Eric Gravatt, the drummer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and uh, but Randy was also just like I was kind of very close to Mike. Randy was very good friends with my brother because they were the same age.
Oh,
So
okay.
these connections go way back.
That's amazing.
Um, but as soon as I got to New York, when I entered the university, I started going around and listening to music, and one of the first things I heard were bands with Dave Liebman and Steve Grossman.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And Steve I'd known from one of these Kenton summer big band camps about 3 years prior, or 2 years prior to my going to the university. So I already knew Steve, and he was kind of a freak. You know, when I met him, he was 14, and he played alto, and he was killing.
Yeah.
Played great. And Dave I met as soon as I got to New York, like 18, 19 years old.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Long time.
How did it feel like when you guys now like? I mean, I know you recorded and played with all of them like on different lineups and recordings through your career, but like when you guys now 5 of you got together, how was that like? I mean, like a family gathering or?
Well, you know what's nice about it is when you when you have a certain understanding with people, playing becomes very easily. You know, that's when you have an understanding that some musicians have, not
Yeah.
all, maybe not most, but some musicians have an understanding of, listen, playing music is like being with a good basketball team. Let's pass the ball
Yeah.
around. Let's not try and hog the ball. And then if somebody gets an open shot, fine, you
Yeah.
know, and let's share it. You know, when people have that attitude, making music is much easier.
It's very easy. Yeah.
And although you can meet someone and play with them and know, I'm sure you know in 2 minutes that that's
Sure.
how they are. Uh, but if you've known them for half a century, it makes it that much easier. You
Yeah.
know. But to give credit where credit was due, my my other very old and close friend in the business, John Abercrombie,
Yeah.
as you know, passed away.
Yeah.
And I'd been playing with him for years and years, mostly in my bands, then as a duo.
Yep.
And then the last 5, 6 years I was in his band.
Yeah.
And which actually started out as my band, and then Manfred heard it and he wanted to record it, but he
I
wanted to
really,
record it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I really.
but he
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to
because
record it
Joey. Yeah.
he wanted to record it as John's band.
Yeah.
And I said, that's fine. You know, I don't care. Um, so, uh, but anyway, as you know, John passed, and there was a memorial concert that we put together, myself and Sarah from ECM in New York, and a couple members of the family, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we were juggling all the musicians who wanted to play and putting bands together, making sure everybody was comfortable with the suggestions. Either they suggested or we
Mm.
suggested. One of the bands that came together was me, Liebman, Randy. Drew played bass, and I think Joey was already with a couple other bands. So Adam Nussbaum played drums
Oh.
with us, and Billy Hart sat in for a tune.
Oh.
And I remember because, you know, Dave and Randy, when I first came to New York, they were playing together in a quintet when we were all teenagers, you know. And I said to Dave, and meanwhile, you know, somebody else is playing and it's noisy and everything. But I looked at Dave, I said, it's like old times, right? He said, yeah. I said, you want to do something with this? He said, sure. I asked Randy the same question. So the rest was easy. It was just scheduling, you know.
Yeah, beautiful.
But there you go.
Yeah, so nice. I mean, so nice what you did. It's like, I mean, already when you start that mystery song with you and Joey, just I think it's like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just,
it's a nice vibe. But the thing
beautiful.
is, so the point is, John kind of brought us together.
Yeah,
You know.
definitely. Yeah.
And of course, John knew us all and had played with all of us and blah blah blah. You know, he played in Dave's bands
Yeah.
way back in the 80s and 90s, and then John and Randy had a kind of very special connection because they both like these old Art Farmer Jim Hall records, and they John wanted to do another one late in his career, and it kind of never happened for
That's a shame. Yeah.
various scheduling reasons. That was right before he made the band, or rather, Manfred made my band his band.
Yeah.
That was right before that. But earlier, I know Randy and John did a quartet record. I believe it was Ron McClure's record date. I'd have to
Oh,
look
yeah,
at
exactly. Yeah.
For Steeplechase, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Probably. Yeah, I have to check it out, but yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I just remember I said to John afterwards, I said, how was the date? He said, oh, I said, you know, he said we got done one or two tunes, and either I think Randy said it to him, or maybe he said it to Randy, but I believe he told me Randy said, well, we're back up to our old tricks. Because they, you know, they had a connection like John and I had.
Yeah.
And so forth and so on. You know, and that's a shame they didn't get to record.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, I have not heard that record, and now we're talking about it, I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I have a couple of Ron's records, but I don't know if I have that one. But I'll definitely go check that out. I mean,
yeah, no, Ron was doing a lot with that label. I'm on 2 or 3 of those, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were a lot of connections going all the way back, you know. And then Dave and I had been working duo.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of quartet, but a lot of duo for 10, 15 years on and off. It kind of became a regular thing, like John and I were kind of a regular.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's you know, John was for me, or is, I mean, still for me, the most, in my opinion, one of the most underrated guitarists. I mean, of course, everyone knows in a way who he is, but you know what I mean. You know, it's like he also how he played, and he's one of. I saw him live so many times. Like, it's just.
I mean,
you know,
look, there's a certain kind of player. You know, where I first heard that kind of approach to music was from Bill Evans, from Jim Hall, from John, blah blah blah. And you know, when you go down that path, you know, it's not as in your face as a lot of music. And so part of the territory is maybe you don't get noticed as much as maybe would be appropriate. And that just, you know, that just comes with the territory. I mean, the couple of times in my career I dabbled with something else for a minute, you know, if somebody else was calling me to do it, I always had a great time. You know, if it was a funk band or whatever it was, I always had a great time. I played the music. I enjoyed it. Brazilian music, all that kind of stuff. But if I tried to do it, it never worked. I felt horrible afterwards because that's not what I
That's
wanted
not
to
you.
do with
Yeah.
my own
Yeah.
stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So I know for people like John and myself, it was a very easy choice, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, John's the guy who, you know, he showed up in New York. This is when I first met him, working with Dreams, which was Randy and Michael's band.
Yeah. Exactly.
This was the hot band in New York. They were the talk of the town. Everybody was going to see them. You know, the only other fusion was like the very beginning of the Mahavishnu
Yeah.
Orchestra. Larry Coryell, 11th House. I don't think Return for Forever might have been just getting going,
Yeah.
but it was more Brazilian at that time.
Yeah.
You know. So the Dreams thing was like on a plateau all by itself. It was the talk of the town. And Mike and Randy, they were not only doing all kinds of jazz and jazz rock gigs with it, but they were busy all day in the studios because the pop producers started to notice all these records with Mike and Randy were becoming hits.
Yeah.
So they're up in Boston and they hear this incredible guitar from a rehearsal studio across the hall, and it's John. And they said, "Man, do you want to join our band?" He said, "Okay." He started commuting down. He played with them for I don't know how long. I got to know him a little bit, just hanging out. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't in the band anymore. And a year later, I'm working with Chico Hamilton playing saxophone, and the regular guitar player had to take a weekend off, and he called John to sub for him. So John comes down to New York. He plays one set. Chico offers him the gig right on the spot, you know. And that was the beginning of our long friendship because we were together all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And I finally said to him one day, I said, "What happened with Dreams?" Because this was like, it was sort of like getting discovered by Hollywood.
Yeah.
Every sense of the word,
Yeah.
you know. And he said, "Well, it was a great band, but I really wasn't into the music." So I left and went back to Boston. And, you know, this was, as I got to know John better, this was a huge influence on me because I was sort of this very ambitious young saxophone player. And I subbed for Mike in that band a couple times when Mike was having a couple of medical issues. He was fine afterwards. And I mean, for me, this was like a dream, you know.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think I played so great on it, but, you know, I was happy to do it. A couple of the gigs went well. And, you know, I couldn't imagine walking away from that. And for John, it was very easy. He said, "It's just not my kind of music."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I was
Amazing.
like, wow.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah.
As time went on, I started to get it.
Yeah. He seemed to follow his thing. Even when you listen like to the stuff, that early stuff with George Duke, you know, the fusionist stuff with John also. It's so effortless, but that, you know, the most I love like this like intimate stuff that he does, like, you know, duos with you, and his own records are amazing always, like composition wise also. It's so unpretentious, if that's the word, you know. It's just like really
There's a writer in France who wrote me a mail recently. He said John was the anti-star.
Yeah.
Said, that's John. And I agree with you about his compositions, which is why I don't know if you have it, but I did this album recently.
I wanted to ask you about that one. Yeah, what you did, that's, you know, what you did with Timeless. I played like last year before the lockdown many solo concerts guitar, and I always played Timeless. And, you know, I tried to explore it on solo guitar, just like, and it's such a nice composition, and how you approached it, I love it, you know, because you get stuck to the original, of course, but then it's such a nice angle what you did. Also, I mean, other tunes, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, obviously, I don't make arrangements of these things. I just play them for a while and something happens, or sometimes something happens kind of right on the spot. But to me, it's sort of what's the right word? Hang on a minute. It's kind of a dialectical thing because on the one hand, you want to honor the spirit of
Yeah.
the original. And on the other hand, you just want to let whatever happens so that ultimately it becomes the way you feel with
Yeah.
that music. And
Yeah.
Where I got that from was Bill Evans and Sonny Rollins. I mean, back in the day, this was the big thing about those two cats. And this is when, a Miles record came out, a Bill vinyl, right?
Yeah.
Bill record came out, a Sonny record came out. It was boom, down to the record store. Oh, it's the new one, and you'd buy it
That's so
immediately.
amazing. Yeah.
And I remember Cannonball said it about Bill. I think they quoted him on the Everybody Digs Bill Evans album, but he said when Bill plays a tune, you think that's the way the tune should be played.
Yeah.
But Bill and Sonny, they didn't play these things like anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just always impressed me. And sometimes it was harmonic, sometimes it was rhythmic. Um, Sonny did this version of Four,
Yeah.
Miles Davis
Yeah.
made famous,
Yeah.
on RCA, and he turns the rhythm around,
Yeah. That it's
and
like da 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 da. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
instead of playing the lick
I like
where it
that.
ends on the upbeat, he plays the lick where it ends on the downbeat.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but it swings like nobody's business. And I remember Randy came over one time when he was already in the university. I was in high school, and I said, "Man, I got to play this for you." And I put it on, and he was just wow.
Yeah.
He was into Sonny too.
Yeah. I mean,
Anyway, that's where that
amazing.
comes from. Is why play it like someone else?
Yeah. But how did you approach, like, let's say this record to John that obviously it's John's compositions. Like, I don't know, you took like, how did you first of all select the compositions? Because you play many songs, I guess, that you didn't play with the quartets, right? Many
Correct.
old stuff, like Remember Him and all that. Like, I love that, those
Correct.
tunes.
Correct.
And how did you make a choice what to play? And
Well, it was a cooperation between myself, producer Philippe Guilmetti from France, and associate producer Stefan Oskaritzian, uh, also French, or Armenian, but French. They're two guys I've worked with over the years. And it was actually, I think, first Stefan and then also Philippe and John's brother-in-law, who's named Gary Lefkowitz, who's also a guitarist. They all were suggesting Remember Him. And the original recording is layered guitar synths.
yeah, yeah.
He doesn't really solo. And Mike is playing the whole thing on tenor. So it's this beautiful wash of sound. And Gary had been recommending it, the brother-in-law, and he kept saying, you got to do this because it was written in memory of Colin Walcott.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it would be a fitting epitaph for John. But I listened to it and I thought, I mean, there's this gorgeous wall of sound and these thick chords. I said, I can't, with acoustic piano, there's no way. And I've tried doing multi-tracking like Bill Evans did. It doesn't work for me. I've tried it. I always think, this is cool. And then I listen back and it's like, So, and I was talking to Philippe, producer, about it before the session. I said, because he said you should do that. I said, yeah, but what am I going to do? All the, that wash of sound and the blah, blah, blah. He says, just forget about it. It was like, okay.
That's the way to do it.
And it was a hard one, but it kind of worked.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, like, this is one of the most beautiful one on the record. I mean, it's,
Thank you.
It's so nice how you approached it. Because you have the original. I mean, at least I have them in my mind. and then to hear them like that, like this stripped naked but not because it's a piano, it's not guitar, of course. It's so nice to hear how strong they are as compositions also.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like if you're a piano player playing solo piano, the worst thing you can do is like walk bass all the time.
Sure.
You don't want to reproduce what should be there.
Yeah.
You want to just give a feeling that captures how a tune makes you feel in here.
Yeah.
Now this is why I can't play just any old tune. It's got to be something that resonates with me.
Yeah.
And it's not a conscious decision. I'll
Sure.
just start hearing something. And the Remember Him was a hard one. But when Philippe finally said, just forget about it, all of a sudden something went,
yeah,
all right, I'm just going to forget about it.
Yeah.
It somehow worked.
It did, yeah, beautifully. But speaking of John, Mark, I just wanted to ask, like those two records you guys did for ECM, the 39 Steps and the Up and Coming, like how was, it's basically, like you said, in a way, your trio with John, but then it's under John's name. But like, how was John like in the studio, or even when you were touring as a band leader to you guys? Because it seems so liberating what you do. Like, it's really like...
John and I played together for, like I say, what, almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, of all the guys we're talking about, and I feel close to all of them and easy to play with all of them. And other than maybe Gary Peacock, he was the guy I felt the closest connection with. So it's not like we didn't have stuff we didn't have to work out. Sometimes you have to make adjustments. Sometimes you have to talk things over. But there's such a depth of understanding. And personally as well, it was never any problem. So the fact that we started working with that band, and I guess it would have been around 2015, I'm not sure, but we started touring and recording, and all of a sudden it was his band, and that was kind of Manfred's decision, but it didn't matter to me.
Yeah, sure.
The only thing that changed is instead of me being the primary composer, John became the primary composer. I said, that's fine. He said, but I want you to write 2-3 tunes for each album. I said, great.
Yeah.
And really behind the scenes, everything, this is the way John is. Everything was done kind of cooperatively anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would routinely make little editorial decisions on his tunes. And he said, yeah, that's better. Let's do that.
That's so cool.
Very open. So it was never a thing,
Yeah, that's how it should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. But you mentioned Manfred, like his idea, ECM has like this amazing long heritage of jazz piano, of course. And I've heard Manfred is like really picky regarding the piano. How was it for you, like as a piano player working with Manfred? How was he like as an influence to the band? Or
listen, I dig him. He's done so much for the music, and you're right. He has this reputation. All I can tell you is he had me do 4 records with his label. Now, not as a leader, but as almost a co-leader.
Yeah.
In everything but name, 4 in like 3 years or so.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that. That's more records than some guys do with him in 10 years.
Yeah, sure.
And listen, it was great after all these years getting to know him a little bit and working with him.
Yeah. So beautiful. But you mentioned also Gary before. And this, you also, I mean, I listened also yesterday to Gary's solo piano record, and talking again about one of the underrated composers, especially, beside being an incredible bass player. But like, I wanted to ask you, where does your story with Gary begin? Like, you also go way back, right? Like,
yes, 1983.
Wow. Okay.
Which means I was, hold on a minute, 35 years old. I get a call from the owner of Jazz Alley in Seattle, Washington, which was in its original location, which was this big place, not so fancy, but big, in the University District in Seattle. And he said, I got an open week here. You want to come out and play trio? Now, he knew me because he had been manager of Blues Alley in Washington, D.C. For a few years. And he had kind of turned that place around from being nothing to being like a real national club with national acts. And I was his house pianist there. So I would back up all the single guys that came in. And both older guys and guys from my generation. I got to play with Art Farmer, Harold Land, Blue Mitchell, blah, blah, blah. Bill Evans came in to hear me one night. I mean, that was
How was that like?
Oh, I was totally nervous. And plus he sat down right behind me.
Oh man, come on.
That was rough. But anyway, I guess Art Farmer, I was working with him, and Art had called him up and said, you got to come down and hear this guy. And I don't know, I was so nervous, but about three tunes into the set, Art looks over my shoulder and says, I told you. So,
that's so cool.
I guess it was cool. I don't know. Anyway, so he said, I want you to come out and play trio. I get two guys out here. I got Jerry Granelli's out here on drums. I said, great. Yeah, he's I've never played with him, but he's good. Or maybe I played with him once. I don't know. He says, who should I get on bass? He says, I said, well, doesn't Gary Peacock live out there? He said, yeah. I said, get him. He says, okay. I hung up the phone and I thought, holy crap, what did I just do? So I'm thinking, I'm out of my mind, So the gig is like 2 months away. And all I see is like the end of my career. I see my career in the cemetery, tombstone. Here lies the career of Marc Copland. Done, over. And because this is like a legendary guy, obviously, even in '83, and such a. I mean, him and Scott LaFaro, they completely turned the instrument around.
Yeah.
Eddie Gomez came a little bit after that. Not much, but a little bit after. So, I mean, and he was still playing great. And I didn't even know the cat, And to make a long story short, I went out, we hit it off, and we played together for the next 47 years.
Wow. Yeah.
But I was nervous,
Yeah, but also such a cool composer as well, right?
Well, the thing is, like John, he wasn't about making a statement with his compositions.
Yeah.
That would be noticed. He just wanted to make a statement, Unlike John, his output was pretty small.
Yeah.
John, I don't know, 100 tunes, maybe more.
Yeah.
Gary must be under 50, maybe under 40, much smaller output. But Gary had kind of a monk-like quality in that almost all his tunes said something really specific, and a little, and maybe in a little different way than Monk, because some of Gary's tunes, Monk's tunes, a lot of them were different, but most of them had a certain thing.
Yeah.
Gary's tunes all had a thing, but they could be very, very different. Some were free.
Very open. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, some might be one or two phrases or three
Yeah.
phrases. Some might be, and I'm thinking in particular of Gaia or even more Carousel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Carousel. Yeah.
which, Carousel, like harmonically, it's like it was written by a pianist
Yeah.
or a guitarist, and the first time I heard it, I think, oh, all right, that must be Ralph's tune. It was Gary's tune. Ralph Towner, who
Yeah.
I did
Sure.
that duo record
Sure.
with. And Gary had all this knowledge, and he again, it wasn't about waving it in front of the listener's face. He just used it when he felt it was appropriate.
Yeah.
And I'm going to move this a little bit because of
Oh,
the
yeah.
sun.
The sun is here.
Clouds just, whoops. Anyway,
Yeah. Amazing.
so Gary was a different vibe in many ways. There's an American writer, J.D. Salinger.
Sure.
I kind of feel like Gary's catalog is like that. Much smaller, very specific.
Yeah.
And, Gary was alive and in reasonable health,
Yeah.
So, we talked. I called him a couple times to discuss it. I called him actually the night after the first session and before the second session, because Stefan, the associate producer, and Philippe, the producer, wanted to do a random mist. And I listened to it. It's from an older record. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure where the tune ends and where the blowing begins. And in fact, knowing Gary, it's probably not a tune. Still working on the sun. But the thing is there we go. The thing is the melody, when he starts it, is absolutely like a little bit of a folk song or an aria.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, once you get into it a little bit, it just sounds like he's blowing. But the way it starts, maybe he did write that.
Yeah.
I called him up. I said, so tomorrow they want me to do random mist. He says, he broke up laughing. He says, I was just improvising. I said, that's what I figured. I said, but do you mind if I kind of take a guess as to where, he said, nah, go ahead,
That's so beautiful.
So out comes the computer, and the headphones. And I'm just like 11 o'clock at
Transcribing.
night. Transcribing the thing, and I get it. And then I just make a decision. I say, okay, the song-like spirit kind of winds down here, and now he's getting really open.
Yeah.
So I will make that the end of the tune.
Yeah.
For no good reason other than I couldn't think of any place that was better.
Yeah.
So
good.
And it kind of worked out.
Yeah, definitely. It's so beautiful. I mean, yeah, you guys had such a nice connection. Like I listened also the other day to that New York recordings you did with Paul Motian. And it's so funny because how differently you guys, both of you and Gary, play in a way. I mean, it's a piano trio, but because of Paul plays so unique also. It's such a cool sound of that trio. Like, did you guys play like more together with Paul also, or?
We did a week at Blues at Birdland in New York.
I did. Oh wow. Okay.
And then we went into the studio, but Paul wouldn't rehearse.
Yeah.
So I had to be careful. But number one, he wouldn't rehearse, and number two, he didn't want to play any standards.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a little tricky, but I think in the end it came out great. I mean, there's 3 records.
3, yeah, sure.
And to tell the truth, I think the first and third are my favorites.
With Bill,
particularly the third one, but the first one is very good.
Yeah.
And I mean, the second one, just to play with Paul and Gary, was great.
Yeah.
What I remember about the third one is it was a very intense experience for me because I was basically in the middle of a not a divorce but a separation.
Mm.
Later turned into a divorce, and I was just laser
Oh
focused
shit!
on
Yeah,
the
that's
music to keep myself sane.
heavy.
You
Yeah.
know? And I think in the way that's one of the best things I've ever done. The first one in the series I really like for a couple reasons. I like this tune Motian, which is the title tune. And the other thing that I like about that is, Bill Stewart's on the first one and the third one, right? And we got to the end of the recording, and I don't know if we had the idea of doing a set. This was the producer's idea, Jason
Yeah.
Sykes. I don't know if it was a set at that point. We were just doing a trio record, I think. So we get to the end of the second day, 4 or 5 hours. And Bill walks over because we're all in the same room, right? Big room. Tony Bennett's studio in New Jersey. Beautiful studio,
Mm.
no longer
Yes.
exists. And he walks over to us, and Gary, I'm right next to Gary anyway. Bill says, "I guess that's it." I said, "Yeah." I look over at the booth. I can't really see Jason and the engineer. I look back and I said, "But we don't have anything fast," which normally wouldn't bother me, but for whatever reason I said it. And Gary looks up like this, and he starts smiling, and he starts playing this lick. And I look at Bill and I said, "Get on the drums, quick!" Bill runs over to the drums. I said, "Jason, roll it."
Oh man.
I said, "Gary, just do what you just did." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, just," and we just started. No rehearsal, nothing.
Oh
And
wow.
that became the opening tune, which, because it's Gary's lick, like, he's the composer,
Yeah.
took that lick and ran with it,
Wow.
which Gary titled Half a Finger Snap.
I have to recheck that now. With this in my mind, I really have to
Yeah.
listen to it again. But
Yeah.
you and Bill.
Absolutely nothing except the idea of that one phrase.
But Mark, you and Bill also. I mean, Bill is on your second All Blues at Night, right? Recording. He was
Correct.
like 18 or 19, and with Gary, ironically,
Yes.
also, right?
Yeah, that's another of my favorite records I've done.
With Tim, I think Hagans.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
How
very,
did you
I'm,
how did you find Bill, by the way?
oh, well, I got a call when I was living in New Jersey from a saxophone player named Scott Kreitzer.
Mm, oh yeah.
And Scott said, "Listen, I got this little studio in my attic in my New Jersey apartment, not far from you." I was living in New Jersey at the time, which is, right over the
Yeah.
river. And he said, I got a couple overdub sessions I'd like you to do. I need somebody to play synthesizer. I said, "Fine." And he said, "Also, I'm doing some sessions with, this bass player named Doug Weiss and this drummer named Bill Stewart. They're students at this university where either he is or was." I said, "Yeah, I'll come play, sure." So I did a couple of these overdub sessions for him, and it's in this tiny little attic above his apartment. I mean, tiny, but he's got all the shit set up and room for a drum set. And then I come over one time to play, and Bill was, great. Doug was great. And, we were doing gigs with Scott and Scott's band. And at that time, Jeff Hirschfield was doing most of my gigs.
Yeah.
And then Jeff couldn't make a gig, at a club in the village. So I called Bill. He said, "Sure." And I don't know if Gary was on that gig or not. I can't remember, although we worked together as a trio quite a bit. Um, and I don't remember whether it was trio or quartet. It might have
Mm.
been a quartet with Tim. I'm not sure. But all I remember is there were a lot of musicians in the club, including Randy Brecker was there with his then wife, Eliane
Yeah.
Elias, and others. And I get off the bandstand and everybody's, "Mark, who's that drummer? He's incredible.
Yeah.
How old is he? I say he's pretty young. I said, he looks like he just walked off a cornfield in Iowa. I said, yeah, I know. So that's how that happened. And Bill was in my bands for however long it was. And then, I forget who picked him up first. I think Lovano picked him up, and then
Schofield, right?
Schofield picked him up from Lovano.
Yeah, the quartet, yeah.
But I was Bill's entree into the New York scene, and I was glad to have him.
Yeah,
we've been playing anyway.
Yeah, it's so cool to already when you see him with Schofield, he's still like this youngster looking. I imagine how he was like when you did it.
Oh, he looked really young. If you're in the same room with him now, he doesn't look 19 anymore. But,
sure.
But from far away, yeah, he still has that vibe.
Yeah, I love that. So cool.
But yeah, that's how that happened. And he, terrific drummer, great guy.
Sure.
Good composer.
Yeah. Also, I have many records of his, like also on Pirouette and the earlier stuff. And it's so cool what he does, like Telepathy. That one. Like, that's so cool. But Mark, I wanted to ask you also one thing. Like, you kind of say when you did the John and Gary records that you kind of have to feel the tunes, that they kind of come from the heart, that you feel like playing them. Is that also behind like the name of the label, Inner Voice? That's the idea also, because I wanted to ask you, like, how did you decide to make a label, and how easy it is nowadays or hard? I mean, nowadays I guess it's a little bit easier because of all the digital workings, or not, or am I wrong?
Well, it's easier in some ways and it's harder in some ways, but for sure there are distribution policies possibilities today that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. That's for sure. And listen, the reason I did it was very simple. I mean, starting in 2001, with, I guess, Sketch and in France, which was Philippe Guilmetti's label, and Hat Hut or Hatology in Switzerland, Werner Rueckert, for whom I did 8-9 records. Pirouette in Germany, for whom I did 8-9 records. Challenge, for whom I did the 3, I guess, 2 or 3. I started recording for all these European labels. Soul Note, and early on, I got some advice from Paul Bley, who I knew. I didn't see him often, but we knew each other pretty well. And Paul and I had breakfast one night at 3 a.m. He said, "Let me take you out to breakfast." And he was a character boy, but he was absolutely sharp as a blade and very smart. And he said, "Don't ever sign with a label." I said, "But they all want me to." He said, "Just play them off against each other. Don't do it." And so, he said to me several other things about the business and about me. And he saw right through me, and he saw exactly what I needed to do or how I needed to deal with people in the business. And it didn't happen right away. But after a few months, if people started approaching me, I understood how to treat them, which was basically, not be standoffish, but just kind of be normal, And that worked out. So I was recording for like 3-4 records a year for all different labels, and they were all complaining, "But you have this other thing coming out." Exactly. I said, "Look," I said, "Do you have distribution in so-and-so country?" "No." But I said, "Yeah, well, they don't have distribution there." "Well, but we both have distribution here." I said, "Yeah, that's one country, maybe two." I said, "I will always keep all of you informed what's coming out when, so they won't come out right on top of each other. And believe me, this is like free advertising. It's the best thing that could happen." And, my stuff must have sold enough because they all kept coming back to me.
Yeah.
That's when I realized this is actually working because I wasn't sure it would work.
Yeah, sure.
And to their credit, they went along with it, and it's not like I ever said no to any of these guys.
Yeah,
So, but rather than having me exclusively and having to fight for me exclusively in a small market,
sure.
they were all supporting each other, even though they didn't see it that way. After a while, it became obvious to them it was kind of working.
Yeah.
And this was before computers. I remember I got a date with the Italian label Soul Note by fax. I sent a proposal by fax, and they went for it. None of the stuff happens like that
Wow.
anymore. And it was all possible if people were just willing to try it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the end, it didn't matter when they came out anyway. It's just these guys were all worried about instead of my Marc Copland record getting its own review, are they going to lump it together with a
Yeah,
record from another
exactly.
label
Yeah.
and do one review of both, which I don't like either. But I don't think that's horrible either.
Yeah.
In the end, it's an old saying among politicians or whatever, any press is good press.
Yeah, definitely. No, but
Um,
I love that. Yeah.
yes, and Blaze all that. So that was going on. This is a long answer to your question, but anyway, this was
No, no,
working
no.
good.
It's perfect.
This was working good till around 2005, and then you could see the business starting to
Yeah.
crash.
Yeah.
I talked with Pirouette, and I said, "Okay, you guys have been asking me about recording exclusively. I'm ready to do it now if you're ready." So they said, "Let's talk it over overnight." I was doing a record in town with them at the time in Munich. And we went to lunch the next day and we said, okay, we're down, let's do it. I said, great. And that lasted about what, 6, 7, 8 years. I did about 7, 8, maybe 9 albums,
Hmm.
which is ironically the same amount I did with Hat Hut without being exclusively signed.
Fine. Yeah.
So in the end, I don't think it mattered, but I wanted these guys to feel more like they were investing in something just as the business was changing.
Yeah.
Challenge was out of business. Sketch was out of
Yeah.
business. They were starting to fall by the wayside. You could see it.
Yeah.
Um, and then at a certain point, I felt like, okay, it's time to move on. Had nothing to do with the label or my relationship to them. Everything was productive, but I just felt it was time to make a move. And all these younger musicians were making their own labels, and I thought, well, man, if they can do it, I ought to be able to try it.
Sure.
And the others, it's like the devil on this shoulder and the angel on this shoulder. And the other one is saying, do you realize how hard this is going to be? Oh, what are you doing? How are you going to distribute? I said, yeah, but I mean, it takes a little bit of courage, but they have the courage to do it. Shouldn't I have the courage to do that? Well, I don't know. You might be biting off more than you can chew.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then I'm lucky enough to have uh, my life partner, Bettina Rossi, is also working for the label, so this helps tremendously. So I
Sure.
don't have to do a lot of the day-to-day stuff, so I can still play piano.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
But that didn't happen right away. I was doing a lot of it at the beginning. But in the end, I'm glad I'm not starting that today because I guess we started in 2015, maybe. I'd have to look at my first release to be sure. And it takes about 4 or 5 years to build it up where
Yep.
people start to notice it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm glad I started when I did.
Yeah, I think especially for you, since you're really prolific and active as a band leader, you do so much stuff. So I think being with labels, I guess, even nowadays they wouldn't like that. Like,
Well, I could understand it. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm not, and the thing is, the market's different, everything's different.
Yeah.
Um, but listen, I just feel like it's a good position right now, and
Yeah.
that could change tomorrow.
Sure.
And this is actually something else that Blay did, you know. He had his improvising artists label.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that going in sort of a little dead zone between recording for other labels and then coming back and recording for those labels again. Because, you know, he wasn't active for a little bit. And
Yeah.
then he started his label. That went on for a little bit. And then all of a sudden he was doing stuff for Steeplechase and ECM and whoever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there was this period in between. I don't know, with the business being the way it is now, I don't see this as an in-between thing. I think
No. Yeah. Sure.
But, you know, that could change. But
Yeah.
the way the business is now, I think I might as well just keep doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have your own control also artistically and everything, so it's
I mean,
it's really important. So.
And listen, it's just nice all around. Philippe Gilmetti, who was the owner and producer of Sketch Records, which went out of business, you know, he'd done a couple things with me on other little small labels he was associated with, and then he came to me and he had the idea for this Gary project. That was all him.
Wow.
And I said, okay. And we did that, and that came out on his label, although he's kind of leased it to my label.
Okay.
So I'm doing the business for it. My label is doing the business for it. But then I got back to him some months after John passed away, and I said, I want to do John.
Yeah.
Just like Gary, everything the same, just a different cat. Will you do it with me? And he said, yeah.
Yeah.
And I even said to him, I don't care if it's your label, my label, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And then it ended up coming out on a label that's a sister label to my original label, which I set up just to have projects that he and I do together.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
And so the point is, I'm still working with other people, and I'm still interested in other people's ideas. You know.
Yeah.
Producers like Philippe, like Manfred Eicher, Werner Ullinger, Jason Seitzer, you know, they've all had an impact on my career and on choices I made. And they've all been very supportive. And they're not only albums, but specific tracks.
Yeah.
I can point to and said, if it wasn't for this producer, this would not have happened.
Definitely. Yeah. If a producer is good, then that's the case. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I view it the same way I view playing with musicians. It's like working on something together.
Yeah.
And if you do it in the right spirit and nobody becomes a dictator, it can really turn out to have a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know, at the end of the day, what is the music like? Where is that at? Is the product, is it high quality?
Yeah.
That's what matters. And that kind of approach has worked for me. And
yeah, definitely.
That's working with people. That's the way I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, sure.
The only way I know.
Mark, can I ask you just something like, how was it like you in the beginning, let's say late 80s when you became a band leader? Like, because you basically did it with John and Gary, so with two guys that you played for, 30, 40 years. Like, but when was the moment when you did My Foolish Heart, like that you said like, okay, I will make a record as a band leader? When was the feeling for you, feeling ripe?
You never find it. It finds you.
Okay.
And you just have to be ready for it. And I know in particular what happened is that label, which was a Japanese label, Jazz City.
Yeah.
Somebody called me with a tip. So-and-so's doing records. He's looking for 10 piano.
Okay.
So there's a guitarist named Yoshiaki Masuo who was playing with Sadao Watanabe at the time.
Wow.
And he was a partner in the label. And I knew him. He was very nice. He said, man, I'm sorry. We already got 10 guys. I said, okay. How about I send you a cassette anyway? He said, Okay. So, but he said, we can't do anything. It's all right. About 4 months later, the phone rings. 5 months. He says, Mark, you're Masuo. Hi, what's up? He says, our 10th guy dropped out. Do you want to do it? I said, sure. So that was the first one. And, you know, the every other thing that happened to me, it's just when it was time. You know,
Yeah.
when I remember, I kind of remember this phone call. There was a musician friend of mine, also a producer named Bob Belden.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah, no longer with us. Bob was a guy I liked playing with and playing for as a composer arranger, and he was also real involved in the business side. And he's a good guy to bounce ideas off of. And at the time, I'd been working with James Moody
Hmm.
for about 2, 3 years, 4 years, and then that kind of stopped. You know, I was doing a few other things, and then Moody had what's his name, David Hazeltine, good
Hmm.
player,
Yeah, yeah.
doing his gigs. So he kept him. I said to Belden, you know, I couldn't make a few of these gigs, and then Hazeltine's doing Moody's gigs now, and I mean, all I've got is like my own trio, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And Bob just said, Mark, it's time.
Yeah.
I took a deep breath. I said, okay, you know, and it doesn't mean you stop working as a sideman,
Yeah.
but the emphasis
Yeah.
changes. And so I had to start thinking like a band leader. Okay, what music do I want to make? And who can I put together to make it? And what projects would I like to do? And who can I interest in these projects? Both in terms of booking agents and in terms of
Yeah.
labor. You know.
You like it?
Instead of sitting around, I wonder who's going to call me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you still love being like you know, how would you describe yourself as a band leader? Like that you know, you give music to people, like are you like, you know, you worked with some of the greats and you've become actually one of the greats also for me regarding jazz piano, but like how do you approach being a band leader? Like
You know, here's what I believe. I believe if I have to tell somebody what to play, it's over.
sure.
And if I'm doing my job at the piano with the kind of touch I like to use and leaving space and blah, 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 and really playing from here, if they're who I think they are, they'll feel that and
Yeah,
they'll play appropriately.
yeah,
And, you know, if they don't, then I know they don't belong there. But if they're not getting it, that's on me
yeah.
because I've got to communicate where I'm coming from so strongly that they don't, for example, uh, I'm just pulling an example out of a hat.
Sure.
A drummer coming to play with the Bill Evans trio, but playing like he was playing with McCoy Tyner trio. You
Okay,
just
yeah, sure,
no drummer would do that, right?
sure.
So it's not about who I am, it's about how I play. And if I'm doing that right, they'll feel it and they'll go with it.
Mm,
And I have almost never found that to fail.
yeah,
So I don't say anything to anybody about the music. Once we're into it, we might talk a little bit about this or that, but for the most part, it's unnecessary.
yeah,
But I tell them if there's something you think I need to know that I'm not picking up on, which is easy because you can get off on a cloud and forget. I said, please tell me. I'm not
yeah.
going to hold it against you. That's the one thing. The other thing that's kind of important for me is my late friend John Abercrombie's old saying, which was, I want to be a sideman in my own band.
Oh, that's a nice
And
one.
he would say that on stage and the audience would laugh and he'd say, no, but I mean it.
Yeah,
And that's the way he ran his band. He just wanted to play with cats. He didn't want to be, you know, a You have to do this. You have to.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've always been, so it's not like I had to change anything to be that way. I just have to remember to stay that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah.
So in the trio, we play some tunes of Drew's, For the quintet recording, which you mentioned, we did, I believe, 2 tunes of Joey's, and one of them we did twice. because that's what sounded the best.
Yeah.
We recorded maybe 2, but I think at least 1 tune of mine, and it just didn't get it. So I thought, is it important to have a tune on this record?
Yeah, I saw that. There are no tunes of you. Yeah.
Interesting. It's not important. What's important? Having the best stuff on the record.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And I remember I called Joey up the night before the session. I said, Joey, I said, what? I said, listen, your tune, I forget the name of it. I can hear the melody. I said, this is going to sound crazy because it's like a medium swing tune. I said, I've been playing it at home as a ballad. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy to you, but what do you think of that idea? It really seems to work. He says, well, let's try it. I said, okay, great. Thank you. So at a certain point in the session, second day, okay, everybody else out, horn players out. And me, the trio, we did it. We did 1 or 2 takes, and it was like falling off a log,
Yeah.
And to me, it's one of the nicest things on the album. So of course it went in. There's another version of the tune. Who cares?
Yeah, sure.
Totally different.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, if you approach it like that. Mark, can I ask you just one more question? Just about your connection with Kenny Wheeler. He's also with John, one of my favorite composers, and I just wanted to ask you, how did your story with Kenny begin? Through John, or?
Actually, yes, but what happened was the agency at that time, the guy called me up. He said, the duo with John is going good, but I think we should add a third.
Oh, well.
And he made a couple suggestions, and John and I spoke, and we both agreed, Kenny. So we called Kenny. He said, sure, I'll do it. And, I'd never gotten to play with him. I knew him. I played a lot with his saxophone player, Stan Saltzman.
Saltzman, yeah. The Jigsaw, I love that record, man. It's so good. Yeah.
But, and it was a pleasure. The thing I remember about Kenny, which I like the best, he was very soft-spoken, very quiet. And but he really had a sense of humor. He just didn't advertise it. So I decided to take a chance one night. He had this big stack of tunes, right? And one of the ones we did was named number
114, that one, or
something like that.
Yeah. So I love that one. Yeah.
Yes. So the way I announced the tune was, I said, we're going to do a tune now by a trumpet and flugelhorn player, Kenny Wheeler. And Kenny had never heard me say this before. Kenny told me a while back, he told me he'd written this tune at a very deep point in a very, very romantic love affair with an extremely beautiful woman. And it's called Number 114. And of course, the audience cracked up laughing. And so I did it the next night, right? And then Kenny says, just loud enough for the audience to hear, he says, they should have seen Number 115.
That's so cool. Beautiful. Cool. Thanks, Mark. I will not bother you anymore. I have so many questions, but we will leave that for next time.
All right. Well, listen, it's nice to meet you. Nice to talk with you.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So. Thank you.
Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.